Hello, 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 and welcome once again to Movies That Pop. I'm the Kernel. Let's see what popped up in theaters this week. War Dogs is a breezy, stylish romp through the apparently shockingly accessible world of international arms sales in Dick Cheney's America. It's so breezy, in fact, that the movie ends up having very little impact, especially considering the weight of the subject matter. Told with a casual magazine article style and bolstered by the charisma of its two stars, Miles Teller and Jonah Hill, the film is diverting for a couple of hours, and if asked for a recommendation of whether or not to see it, I'd reply with a shrug and a, yeah, sure, why not? That's it for the capsule review. Let's get in depth.
Is this safe, driving to Baghdad?
Very safe. 50-50.
Like 50% we live, 50% we die?
Yes, this is why we drive through the night. It is much safer.
How much safer?
50-50.
There's a great joke from the trailer of War Dogs. In fact, you could say that most of the best bits from the movie are in the trailer, as is so often the case. You could describe this movie as, okay, it's about two regular guys who strike it rich and get in over their heads quickly, but that's not really the case. In fact, it's hard to get a read on just what kind of story we're being told here. Any attempt to boil it down to its essence with a pithy catchphrase, oh, it's just about ride or die bros, or it's a morality tale, would selectively have to ignore one or more aspects of the story. Attempts to compare this film to similar films that have come before, like Blow or Lord of War, fall short again because the story itself is so bouncy and slight. War Dogs has the feel of a magazine article, which makes sense when you discover that it was indeed based on an article in Rolling Stone. Not only is it narrated in voiceover from beginning to end, but it has chapter stops, black title cards, which contain quotes from lines of dialogue that will appear in the next section of the film. This abbreviated feel extends to the soundtrack as well, with some great stylish, if entirely on the nose, song choices that keep popping up. This doesn't mean that the movie is bad at all. In fact, I found myself carried along pretty well through the entire thing. It just ends up feeling superficial, especially when dealing with the movie's characters and themes. Miles Teller plays David Packhouse, a massage therapist and our narrator, who is in a rut financially until an old friend named Ephraim comes into the mix and brings him into his already established business of picking up U.S. military weapons contracts and filling the orders. They experience increased success once they team up, and their adventures, while kind of episodic in nature, form the majority of the fun stuff of this movie. They also, surprisingly for a movie with such heavy subject matter, have very little depth, as you can see the tracks where a more effective drama would have branched off, but the focus is on pacing and fun, to the detriment of the story. The two guys don't hatch the idea together.
I have a big idea.
David joins Ephraim's business, which is already in progress. There is a specific turning point where the guys move from being merely unethical to illegal, and the movie just sort of brushes right past it without mining it for drama. David goes through a crisis with his girlfriend and later his daughter over his business and the danger it entails, but in the end, that girlfriend, played by the very appealing Ana de Armas, is pretty accepting, and that conflict never really goes anywhere. The character of Ephraim, as played by Jonah Hill, is actually a pretty interesting creation of the movie, until he is responsible for one or two twists too many. In the end, he's a little too inscrutable, too hard to pin down or define, that he almost seems to act at the whims of the writers, rather than resembling a real person, whose motives are easy to track. Which is a shame, because Hill, blustering around at a size bigger than we've ever seen him, puts on a real fireworks show as the ugly, rich, entitled American who displays just as much business acumen and just enough immaturity to be really dangerous. That is, until he makes a series of stupid blunders that completely destroy all of the credibility that he has earned, and his character stops making any logical sense. For a long while, though, this movie is fun in that how the hell did these two guys get away with all these shenanigans kind of way. Directed with visual flair by Todd Phillips of the Hangover movies, this thing breezes on by with no real impact as events just sort of unfold, and everything just kind of works out, except for a minor character who gets murdered, but you know, that's sort of glossed over too. And then the credits just start rolling, and you end up with the feeling that you might have gotten after reading that magazine article. You just sort of put it down and take a second and go, huh, before moving on to something else. For that reason, I give the perfectly agreeable War Dogs a medium bag of popcorn. As the summer winds down, it's a decent enough way to spend a night out or catch up with later on HBO. It could have been better, sure, but, you know, it does the job. I ain't mad at it. That does it for this edition of Movies That Pop. Don't forget, you can follow me, the Kernel, on Twitter, @MoviesThatPop. Also, take a moment to click the icon right down there to visit our channel. While you're there, do us a favor and click subscribe so you'll find us easier next time. Be sure to let me know what you thought of War Dogs in the comments below. In the meantime, thanks for watching. I'm the Kernel, and this movie is, 50-50.